In 2006, two college students crossed paths at Duke University. One would go on to become a loud, defiant voice of white nationalism. The other would stay in the background, quiet, calculated, invisible to most, but far more dangerous. Because while the first one grabbed headlines, the second would write policy, ruthless policy, policy that changed lives, policy that broke families. And Stephen Miller is still behind the scenes today, scripting out just about every policy and decision being made in the White House. If you enjoy contemporary history stories like this, hit that like button, subscribe to History, and become a member. We drop new episodes every Sunday and Wednesday. These are the stories they tried to erase, but stories that must be told. Stephen Miller grew up in Santa Monica, California in the 1990s, a place known for sunshine, progressive politics, wealth, and diversity. His family lived in a very nice neighborhood, and Stephen attended Santa Monica High School. His classmates were a mix of backgrounds: Latino, Black, white, Asian, gay, straight, immigrant, and native born, and that bothered him. But to understand Stephen Miller, you have to go back further. Before high school, before politics, back to the people who made his life in America possible. Stephen Miller's great-great-grandfather, Volab Glosser, came to the United States in 1903 from what is now Belarus. He arrived at Ellis Island with $8 in his pocket. He spoke Polish, Russian, Yiddish, but he didn't speak English. He was fleeing pogroms, violent, state-condoned assaults targeting Jewish families across Eastern Europe. These weren't spontaneous outbursts. They were organized terror campaigns. Villages were burned, synagogues destroyed, women attacked, children killed, entire communities wiped off the map. Volab left everything behind to escape it. He came here to survive. He settled in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and started small, selling dry goods from a horse-drawn cart. His eldest son, Nathan, followed. Together, they worked brutal hours, sending what little money they had back to the old country so the rest of the family could eventually join them. In 1906, that included young Sam Glosser, Stephen Miller's great-grandfather. This was not a privileged family. They worked, sweated, sacrificed, and they rose. From peddlers to shopkeepers to running a haberdashery, then a chain of discount department stores. At its peak, the business employed thousands of people and was listed on the American Stock Exchange. In just a few generations, it's the all-American success story. They went from refugees escaping ethnic violence to educated, prosperous American citizens. That's the foundation Stephen Miller was born into. And he never talks about it. He doesn't celebrate it. He doesn't connect with it. And he doesn't seem to care that had Volab Glosser waited just a few years longer, immigration policies in the United States likely would have kept them out, and the Holocaust would have claimed them, just as it did nearly everyone else in their hometown of Anapol, Belarus. Instead, Stephen Miller built his identity on the idea that immigrants were a threat, that multiculturalism was a weakness, that inclusion was dangerous. As a teenager in Santa Monica, Miller immersed himself in right-wing talk radio. Rush Limbaugh was his idol. He wrote furious letters to local newspapers condemning immigrants, political correctness, and tolerance itself. He once stood at a school assembly and gave a speech arguing that Spanish-language announcements were un-American. The room froze. Some thought it was a stunt, but Miller wasn't joking. At 16, he delivered one of his first public bombs. Osama bin Laden would feel very welcome at Santa Monica High School. There were laughs, nervous ones, but again, Miller was dead serious. He didn't want to be accepted. He wanted to be heard. And the more controversial he became, the more alienated he got. Friends distanced themselves. Teachers struggled to reach him. Even family members didn't understand what was happening. But he kept writing. He defended border walls, argued that racism wasn't real, but illegal immigration was, that diversity made America weaker, that systemic inequality was a myth, and the real victims were people like him. By the time he got to Duke University, he wasn't there to learn. He was there to sharpen his weapon. It was at Duke where he met Richard Spencer, a far-right graduate student who would later become one of the most infamous white nationalists in America. But back then, he was just another ideologue looking for an ally. He found one in Stephen Miller. According to Spencer, the two worked closely. He later said Miller was totally open to the idea of white identity, that he believed Western civilization was under attack and needed defending. Miller began organizing campus events and inviting controversial speakers, David Horowitz, Peter Brimlow, voices known for anti-immigrant, often white nationalist rhetoric. But Miller wasn't just booking rooms. He was absorbing the message, repeating it, and amplifying it. And then came the moment that confirmed who he really was. During one of these events, Miller stood before a crowd and defended the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Not as a mistake, not as a tragedy. He said it was justified. Ethnicity-based detention was necessary for national security, that America had every right to imprison its own citizens if it made others feel safer. That wasn't about debate. That wasn't curiosity. That was cold, deliberate ideology. And he said it less than 2 decades after President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which formally acknowledged that internment was wrong. Reagan apologized. The government paid reparations to survivors. There was bipartisan agreement, Republicans and Democrats alike, that what had happened to Japanese Americans was a national shame. Very few Americans defend that policy anymore. Stephen Miller did. He was no longer just a campus conservative. He was something else, something darker, something more dangerous. All the while, his own family's story, the story of refugees welcomed into America who worked their way into the fabric of the nation, stood in open contradiction. Years later, his uncle, Dr. David Glosser, would speak out. He didn't just criticize Miller's politics, he exposed the family history that Stephen had chosen to ignore. He said, quote, had Wolfleave arrived just a few years later, he would have been turned away. The Glossers would have been murdered in the Holocaust, like most of the Jews from Antipole. But they weren't because the country let them in, unquote. He pointed out that even after arriving, the family faced hatred and suspicion like many immigrant groups, but America didn't bar the door. And because of that, generation of Americans got the chance to live, thrive, and contribute. Stephen Miller never mentions any of that because it doesn't fit his narrative. After college, Miller became the communications director for Senator Jeff Sessions, a man known for his hardline stance on immigration. From there, he joined Donald Trump's presidential campaign, then the White House. And while Sessions, who became Attorney General, eventually was removed from Trump's bitter anti-immigrant orbit, Miller remained. He helped craft the Muslim ban. He pushed for separating families at the border. He tried to end birthright citizenship for Dreamers. He launched aggressive ICE raids in sanctuary cities. By the time Stephen Miller was shaping national immigration policy, it wasn't just his public statements raising alarms. It was the source material behind them. In 2019, nearly 1,000 emails Miller had sent to editors at Breitbart News came to light. And they showed in detail how deeply embedded he was in the world of white nationalist media. In those messages, Miller didn't just echo anti-immigrant views, he promoted them. He pushed links to sites like VDare, which publishes explicitly white supremacist content. He highlighted articles meant to stir racial fear. He referenced books and ideas that claimed immigration was destroying Western civilization. And he encouraged Breitbart editors to shape their coverage around those ideals. The emails were provided by Katie McHugh, a former Breitbart editor who had once been a true believer in the far right. But she later left that world and described it as evil. She said she witnessed firsthand how white supremacy operates behind the scenes, and she turned over the emails to show just how close it had come to the center of power. She called it a warning, and it was. Today, Miller is behind a sweeping playbook for Trump's second term, a plan that bears his name in everything but ink. It's a plan he's been working on since the day Trump lost in 2020. A roadmap for unchecked executive power. A list of actions designed to detain, deport, and dehumanize. Trump denied it during the campaign, but every week since returning to office, elements of Project 2025 have come to life. Mass deportation squads, expanded detention camps, new limits on birthright citizenship, power shifts that would give the White House control over independent agencies and wipe out career experts in government who have knowledge of how the law is supposed to work. Blocking credentialed journalists and organizations from rightful spots to cover historic events while threatening lawsuits to minimize negative coverage. Challenging judges, threatening impeachment, while sometimes ignoring court rulings altogether. Stephen Miller's fingerprints are everywhere. This isn't a debate about immigration anymore. It's about power. It's about targeting people based on race, religion, and national origin. And no matter what side of the political aisle you're on today, history is crystal clear. Once a nation starts legally dividing people into insiders and outsiders, favored and feared, safe and disposable, justice doesn't survive. Trump didn't write this plan. Neither did his chief of staff. It came from the shadows, from a quiet architect who's been laying the groundwork for years. Stephen Miller, the angry teenager who once defended internment camps while ignoring his own family's struggle and survival from them. And while we tell history stories here, it's clear Stephen Miller is not finished.
New episodes drop twice a week only on Heath Story. If you'd like to support the channel, subscribe now, leave a like and a comment, and become a member by clicking below.